So this season, Bungie decided to refresh some of our old season of the Undying weapons, which, let's be real, community sentiment for these weapons is a bit underwhelming. And at first, we weren't even going to cover these, but it turns out there is a hidden gem, and that is the Arc SMG Subjunctive, which for many players may be an attractive option, especially for those that never obtained the Aztecross SMG. Now, some of the basics out of the way, Subjunctive is a 900 round per minute lightweight frame Arc SMG, which, by the way, is a fantastic archetype. Look at weapons like Callous Mini Tool, Funnel Web, Submission, Showrunner with kinetic trimmers. Subjunctive here falls within that same archetype. Now, don't get me wrong, I love aggressive 720s, especially in PvP, but lightweights are phenomenal in PvE. The problem is, at least for an Arc SMG, Aztecross has reigned supreme, as it was the only SMG to roll with Volt Shots. Now, for stat comparisons, Subjunctive shoots faster, we have higher base stability, higher handling, higher reload speed, magazine size is better, even aim assist is better. What we're missing out on is, of course, range and the fact that it does less damage per bullet in comparison to Aztecross. But more on that in just a moment. For now, though, let's get into the perks and why we're actually bringing up this weapon. We're going to start with our fourth column perks first. We have Swashbuckler, Disruption Break, Permeability, Attrition Orbs, One for All, Volt Shots, and Golden Tricorn. Now, the star of the show here is clearly Volt Shots, considering this is only the second SMG to roll with it, and it's on a completely different SMG archetype. The perk reads that reloading this weapon after defeating a target overcharges the weapon for a short period of time, causing it to jolt on its next hit. Now, we've talked about this perk many times. Most of you already know what Volt Shot is. It's fantastic for ad clearing. It was actually so good that Bungie had to nerf it at the beginning of Lightfall. But even after that, it's still great. The jolt can add extra damage to higher health targets. Jolt can also stun overload champions. And since this weapon can be crafted, the enhanced version of Volt Shot gives you 1 extra second to add to that buff timer, bringing it to 8 seconds total. Now, Volt Shot isn't your thing though. We have a lot of other options. We've got Swashbuckler for that 33% damage bonus at 5 stacks, One for All for that 35% damage bonus after just hitting 3 enemies, no kills necessary, and then you have Golden Tricorn, which initially gives you that 15% damage buff, but then jumps up to 50% if you follow up with a grenade or melee kill. But I think for the majority of us, we're gonna lean toward Volt Shots. Now, taking a look at our third column, we have Under Pressure, Shoot to Loot, Hipfire Grip, Grave Robber, Threat Detector, Stats for All, and Subsistence. Now, what we're gonna be looking for here is what synergizes best with Volt Shots. Turns out, really only 2, Threat Detector and Stats for All. Now, Threat Detector reads increase reload, stability, and handling when enemies are in close proximity. At times 1, we get plus 15 stability, plus 25 handling, and a 0.9 times handling duration multiplier, as well as plus 15 reload speed, just for having 1 enemy within 15 meters of us, which, considering this is an SMG, that's pretty much gonna happen all the time. Now, if you have 2 or more enemies within 15 meters, this is gonna give you times 2, which is a 40 stability buff, 100 handling, and a 0.81 times handling duration multiplier, as well as plus 55 reload speed. And the enhanced version kicks this up even further, as it says that it greatly increases reload speed, stability, and handling. Now, Stats for All may actually fit your playstyle better, as it reads that hitting 3 separate targets increase weapon handling, stability, reload, and range for a moderate duration. Now, procs just like One for All, as you simply just need to damage 3 separate targets within 3 seconds of each other, and you'll get that plus 10 range, plus 10 stability, plus 35 handling, a 1.05 times increased damage fall off distance, and a 0.95 times reload multiplier that lasts for 10 seconds or 11 seconds with the enhanced version. Now, both of these perks are solid pairings. Threat Detector is going to give you a higher reload speed if time 2 is active, and considering it's an SMG, you're probably going to be within range to have that perk activated. Stats for All is not bad though either. Now, another thing to note is that if you're playing as an Arc Hunter and you're using the aspect Flow State, you may be able to go a different route with your third column perk. This aspect reads that defeating a jolted target makes you amplified, and while you're amplified, your dodge recharges more quickly. You're also more resilient while dodging, and your reload speed is greatly increased. Now, according to Destiny data, this gives us a 200% additional base class ability regeneration, as well as plus 50 reload speed and a 0.8 times reload duration multiplier, on top of a 66% damage resist when dodging. Now, with that being said, in my opinion, guys, even after looking at all these things, Threat Detector Detector and Stats for All are the best picks in this perk column, but you can still go with things like Shoot to Loot. I know some of you are probably wondering, Cross, why not Subsistence? The problem with Subsistence is that it runs into conflict, guys, with Volt Shot. It's really not helping us at all. It's not exactly self-proccing Volt Shot, even though it is technically reloading the weapon. Because we're not manually reloading, Volt Shot itself is not proccing. But I'm gonna bring up why you really don't need Subsistence, and that's due to the origin trait Nano Munitions. This is on all of our Vex offensive weapons, stating that being near allies slowly builds up a partial emergency ammo refill for the next time this weapon runs out of ammo. Now, emergency ammo amount increases with time spent near allies. Now, at first I was worried that this was actually gonna mess with the gameplay loop of Volt Shot, similar like Subsistence, but it actually doesn't at all, and it ends up helping you in some cases. How this perk works is when you're within 15 meters of an ally, you gain a stack of nano munitions every 3 seconds, and it caps out at ×7. Then once you've burned through your magazine, you'll use up a stack, giving you 9 shots back for Subjunctive. So with a base magazine, if you were to reach 7 stacks, you can shoot out, get this guys, 99 bullets before you even need to reload. And since this origin trait only works once you've burnt all your ammo, it means you can freely reload whenever you like in order to activate Volt Shot after a kill. If you apply Jolt to a target, this origin trait can be quite nice in order to keep spraying into them, giving you more of that Jolt damage. Or if you want to take a more traditional route of damage dealing, this could pair beautifully with something like Subsistence and One for All if you weren't going the Volt Shot route and you just want to deal a ton of damage. But again, we're still hung up on Volt Shot here, guys. So we talked about Subjunctive having better stats. We talked about its access to Volt Shot just like Aztecross, but let's talk about its performance. Looking at our damage values against red bars, Subjunctive is doing 1,175 damage to the body and 1,946 to the head. Against Carl, we're doing 946 to the body and 1,567 to the head. Now comparing this to Aztecross, it's doing 1,515 to the body and 2,272 damage per crit against red bars. And against Carl, 1,220 to the body and 1,829 to the head. So on paper, Aztecross SMG is doing more damage. But looking at DPS as well as total damage, this changes. Just taking into account the total damage for Subjunctive, based on a magazine size of 36, we're able to deal 56,412 damage compared to Aztecross's 49,383 damage. In terms of DPS, Subjunctive actually clocks in at 23,505, with Aztecross coming in at 21,948. Now for Jolt damage, both of these weapons are doing the same amount from Volt Shot. This is not scaling differently per archetype, both doing Volt Shot damage of 9,586 versus red bars and 6,266 versus Carl. So which SMG is better? Guys, I'm actually leaning more towards Subjunctive. Granted, a lot of this comes down to personal preference. I personally like the feeling of lightweight SMGs, the movement speed bonus, and yes, even though per shot we're dealing less damage, you're making up for that with that faster fire rate, as well as that higher magazine size. I think the only drawback with Subjunctive is that it's not necessarily the most attractive weapon. Aztecross is sleek. Just looking at it from your first person perspective, it's oozing with sex appeal, which is like the opposite of what Subjunctive has going here. The side is definitely not nearly as clean as Aztecross's. Aztecross also has access to things like Feeding Frenzy, as well as Threat Detector to pair with Volt Shot. And perhaps to the average player, the rate of fire and even the DPS increase from Subjunctive isn't that noticeable to you. I will say though, for sure, if you do not have the craftable Aztecross SMG, then Subjunctive is a fantastic alternative, and for some others, may become the primary Volt Shot SMG for you. I know this season is really focused on Solar and Strand and even Stasis to some degree, but if you're looking for an SMG that will be as useful to you in your arsenal as Callus Mini Tool is with Incandescent, pick up Subjunctive. It is a very solid PvE SMG. Now this takes us to PvP, guys. Is this a great option for PvP? Well, fellas, I tried, man. I mean, I really tried to make this work. Even loading out the stats, getting its range up to 61, almost touching 20 meters. The reality is, in every situation, was getting pooped on. Granted, at the same time, I'm playing cheaters left and right, so who even knows what's real anymore? I actually enjoyed using this SMG, but when it comes to PvP, I do prefer aggressives. And if I'm not using an aggressive SMG, then I'm going to use a precision like Shiora. I do want to say though, Subjunctive didn't perform terribly for me. It just has really stiff competition out there. Between the likes of Immortal, Unending Tempest, Shiora, the competition is fierce. Now, one time I used to religiously use lightweight SMGs inside of PvP, one of them being Funnel Web. I know a lot of people were hung up on it inside of PvE, but Funnel Web was actually phenomenal inside of PvP. What made it so good though was its reticle. It was easy to track, it was nice and thick, and I found that it handled its 1v1s very well. Subjunctive here doesn't necessarily have that ease of use. Yes, you can roll it out with enhanced threat detector and whatever final perk in that last column you want, whether it's swashbuckler or maybe rocking a melee-based build, but you're gonna see some of the limitations that this SMG has. It is a very, very good SMG for PvE, but for my PvP players, I would definitely rock something else. Well, fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching, and as always,
Slap that like button like your mama told you right.